Awesome. Are
All
we
right.
ready to go?
I think so.
So while we're working on this, folks, I am going to ask just a general question to get us started. How many of you know what the period of participation report is in Teams and use it? So maybe that's two questions. So how many of you are familiar with the period of participation report in Teams? So thanks so much for joining us. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Mahalia Baldini. I'm the supervisor here at the Texas Workforce Commission, and I work in adult education and literacy. So I'm very pleased to do this event and have you guys on board. So just some objectives and materials for today. So as Krista mentioned, this is going to be part one of a series that I'm doing. Part two will be in April. Today we're going to be focusing on the period of participation report in Teams and discussing some of the uses and limitations of that report. My goal really is to give you guys just some uses, some ways that it can help you in the field, whether you're an administrator or specifically an educator, and a way of looking at student information and kind of correlating that back to some of the performance measures that we have as a state. So this is going to be part two, and then part one, and then part two will be in April. In April, just to give you a heads up for what that will look like, we're actually going to have a new report in Teams that's going to be super, super awesome, and I've been promoting it like crazy to administrators in the field. And this is going to be a measurable skills gain report, so you're going to be able to see, it's going to basically take the place of the participant roster, but instead of seeing only pre-post testing gains, you're also going to be able to see your high school equivalency. You're also going to be able to see if any individual went into post-secondary education. And so anything in regards to measurable skills gains, you'll be able to see on that report. Right now, that's slated to come out and be available to you April 1st. So I want to make sure that we get some information about that. Well, you should have a POP report description. This is a report description straight out of Teams, not something I just, hand created myself, but worked with a team on. And this is going to be a very specific column by column breakdown of what is in the period of participation report. You should also have a sample, which is a POP report extract. And this is real information and real data. We've just hidden all the PII in it so that we could use it for today's purposes. So that is the materials for today. The first thing I wanted to kind of talk about was just a little bit of background. I'm not sure how many of you are really familiar with what a period of participation is. And when we're talking about the period of participation report and what it's going to, information it's going to be able to give to you, I wanted to be able to give a little bit of background just about what a POP is in general. So the period of participation really has to do with how we measure performance under WIOA. So under WIOA, which is our current authorization for our AFLA dollars and the funding that's going out to do the local work, we have something that's called a period of participation for each individual that's coming into the program. A period of participation starts when they have 12 direct contact hours. So getting those 12 direct contact hours, of course, you have to have a baseline to determine eligibility. Once you have that baseline and they get 12 direct contact hours sitting in a class, coming to class, then they're considered, hey, they're a real participant at that point. Anyone with less than 12 hours don't fall into our performance measures. So that's kind of a feat in itself. And one thing that the period of participation, and I'll call it POP report from here on out just because that's a mouthful. So one thing the POP report tells you is how many people are you getting to that 12 hours? So that's an important piece because every single person that hits that 12 hours is a person that we're measuring at that point. Now that POP will continue for as long as that person is in the program. So as long as they're in the program and they're continuing to receive services, regardless of program years and regardless of some of these other things that we've had in the past, they're going to be in that participant status for that whole time. So unless they just stop coming to class, they stop getting distance learning hours, and they stop getting any kind of training hours that they're getting, that person stays open to us. There's nothing you can do in Teams to remove a person from your class or from performance once they hit that 12 hours. All of that is done through an automated mechanism to say, as long as they're in class and they're continuing to come to class and they're getting direct, proxy, or training hours, that person is still in the program. So that's one thing I think it's important from an instructional level, is just to know you can inactivate and put an end date on a student into Teams. Basically in Teams it will say, hey, that person's inactive, and that may be true, but that doesn't mean that they're removed from any kind of performance measures. So when we're grouping our performance measures, I tend to think of them in sort of two big buckets. One is what I call program year-based performance, and the other one is what we call period of participation-based performance. Program year-based, you guys are probably familiar, which is enrollments, right? How many individuals do we have that are coming into the program that actually sit in class for 12 direct hours? Those are all these enrollment targets, and they include services to employers, they include internationally trained professionals, all these different kind of subcategories. Integrated education and training is also a big category for us. This is also going to be where your measurable skills gains come in. So that is a program-based performance measure, which means that is a measure that has to happen between July 1st and June 30th every single program year. And then we have period of participation measures, and those are all exit-based. And what that measures is, regardless of how long a person is in the program, when they exit, meaning they no longer are getting services for 90 days, they're going to fall into employment outcome measures. There's nothing except for you guys telling us, this person is exempt from being in this measure because, hey, they're currently incarcerated, right? So everybody kind of falls into these exit-based measures, except for the credential rate, because that has a little bit more specific criteria. But all your individuals that exit the program fall into this employment measure. So this is something that the POP report, and we'll get into a little bit later, that it can really help you to kind of see when students are exiting your program. It can help you to see when they're leaving your program, and that's a term that I know Eduardo out in Socorro uses a lot, and that's to say, when do they stop coming to class? So that is one thing that this report will do. So just to give you some visuals and what we're talking about when we're talking about period of participation and the way that this report can help support you. If you're thinking about a participant, this particular visual is going to show you a person that comes in about the end of August, and they continue all the way through the program year, gaining hours, and they don't exit program or exit the services from us until the next July. So let's just say from July 1st to July 10th, they get about 5 hours. So when you're looking at this person, you are trying to determine how many measurable skills gain does this person need. So they're in our program for 2 program years, but they only have 1 period of participation. That's what this image is showing us, right? So very similarly, this is just another view of a person who has a period of participation that's kind of spanning across 2 program years. And what we know in terms of the measure and how we are being measured is that this participant would need 2 measurable skills gain during that period of participation because we have 2 program years. So they would need an MSG for that first program year that ran July through June, and then they would need another MSG for the program year that's running in this example from July through November. And regardless of how much time they have, just like in the previous visual, even though it's only 5 hours, that period of participation extended into a second program year. And so guess what? We're on the hook for an MSG, regardless of whether that's 1 hour, 2 hours, or like in this case, you know, probably multiple hours between July and November of that second program year. And if you guys are having questions, go ahead and put them in the chat pod. I want this to be super discussion focused, and some of you, this may be information you're seeing for the very first time, so go ahead and ask questions. If I don't have time to answer them as we're going, then I will attempt to answer them at the end. So in this particular example, if I'm looking at this, and there's all sorts of ways when you really think about just the natural flow of how our students come in and out of the program sometimes, you will maybe have one student that comes in and out of the program multiple times in the same program year. And what this can create is multiple periods of participation for that student. So in this example, you have a student that comes in September or the end of August, and they basically stop out in November. So they become, that's their first period of participation within that program year. The student's gone for 90 days, right? That's what generates the exit in November. And then they come back and they start up again in February. And this can be very typical of students who tend to go on long breaks over holidays and things like that. We see this kind of all the time in the data. They come back and they're ready to start participating again in February, so they start a new period of participation, which means they're coming back in February, they've set for an additional another 12 hours in a class. That has started a second period of participation, which they maintain until May. So even though we're looking at one program year, this particular student has been in multiple periods of participation. And every time, going back to what we talked about before, there is an exit, then there is a measure related to that. So this particular student has actually two different performance periods because they have two different exit criteria for those employment outcomes. Now, so certain things are program year based when it comes to performance, and certain things are these exit based. So when we're looking at program year based, even though this student had two periods of participation, we still only are required to get one measurable skills gain for that person. So just because they may have left in November, they came back in February, you still have opportunity all the way up until June 30th to get a measurable skills gain for this person.
Mahalia, we did have a question. Should we enter an exclusionary reason for inmates that we serve at the correctional facility?
Really good question, and the answer is yes. So the only thing, going back to one of the earlier slides, and what I said was the only way really to take a person who's exited the program out of an employment-based measure is for you guys to tell us, hey, this person was incarcerated at the time that they exited our program, and therefore they're not going to get any wages. So you can exempt them from that measure. But you would have to put that in teams, and right now the capability and functionality is there for you to do that. So good question, Suzanne. You would definitely want to do that for anyone that you know is a person that you're serving in corrections. You're going to want to put that into teams the moment you know that they have separated from services. So moving on, good question. Keep them coming. I like good questions, and I don't mind getting in the weeds because my goal for you guys is just I want to give you as much information as I can. So the new reports and teams, and really what all of this, yes.
I'm sorry, one more.
Yes.
And is incarceration the only exclusion for the employment measures?
No, there's actually several. One of them is, so incarceration is actually, there's two of them. So let me kind of briefly tell you what those are. And I'll show you on the POP report how you can actually see that information once you've entered it, so you can kind of keep track. There is, for corrections individuals, you actually have two options. The first one is if you have an individual that you're working with, let's just say, I'm calling it on the outside, you're working with them in class, and then something happens during the course of that time with you, and they become incarcerated. So Jimmy or Jane gets locked up, and they become incarcerated. So that's one form of an exclusion. Another one is the fact that we serve a lot of people that are incarcerated at program entry. So that is a different exclusion altogether. So we track those two different types of exclusions separately. And so when you go to enter that into Teams, you're going to want to make sure that you choose the correct one. So there's a big difference between someone who was not incarcerated at the time that we started working with them, but went on and became incarcerated versus someone who was incarcerated from the beginning. Some of the other exclusionary reasons are people that are called up to active duty and are going to be out of participation for more than 90 days. Someone who has a medical condition, and we have gotten word and documentation that, you know, they're going to be in a hospital, they have a surgery, and their recovery is going to last more than 90 days. Someone who's passed away, obviously that's an exclusionary reason, and we do have instances where that has happened. So there's lots of different reasons for excluding someone from basically a measure that requires them to be employed. You know, a dead person is not going to be employed. A person who's incarcerated is not going to be employable. They're not going to be earning taxable wages while they are incarcerated. So some of those exclusions are just kind of the common sense things. And I will just give you this one tidbit. We're going to have a webinar that's going to be coming out very soon on exclusionary reasons. So if you're interested in learning more about that, make sure to keep an eye out for the PD portal because that's going to be coming out here very soon. So I'm going to go ahead and move on. You guys flag me if there's any more questions. So I want to start talking a little bit about the reports. So one of the biggest things and one of the biggest issues that we've had since WIOA started was the fact that you guys are giving us a lot of information, but you're unable to pull out information as easily as you're able to enter it. And a lot of that was just because primarily we needed a way to be able to report what we were doing to the feds, and now we're getting down to some good stuff where we can actually go back and help you guys and support you guys locally with some new reports to help you manage all these performance measures. So all the new reports and teams are going to be built to do some pretty specific things. One is going to be just to help you better manage students' performance in real time. So you're getting reports right now, and your administrators are getting reports, but there's a lot of lag time associated with that. The other thing is to help you better understand patterns that are occurring with your students. You know, how many students are staying for a full testing range, meaning how many of them are staying for 40 hours versus how many are only going to stay for 15, or how many do you have that are long-term legacy students? Those are some things that you'll be able, we want to build reports to help you be able to do that. We also want to just support future system enhancements for performance expectations, whatever they may be. So let's talk about the POP report for the next little bit of time that we have here, because I have a feeling I want to get to the exercise because I think that's going to be beneficial for those of you, and the ability for you to ask some questions. So POP report, again, this stands for Period of Participation Report. Before we get into the specifics of that, I want to talk about what is happening currently in Teams versus what we can expect in the future. So right now in Teams, currently when it comes to assessments and it comes to measurable skills gains, Teams is still looking at old methodology. So we have a new assessment guide that's out, but we haven't been able to update all of that in Teams because it's pretty extensive. So we no longer use domain of significant based performance. So a lot of times if you go in Teams right now and you're pulling reports, you're seeing things that really don't accurately reflect what you're getting credit for in terms of performance. The future Teams for assessment and MSGs, the new assessment guide policies will all be implemented into Teams. So if there's something that exists within that assessment guide, Teams is going to start having the functionality and capability to correspond to all those policy changes. So you're going to know exactly who an individual is at a state level, and when I say that is right now most individuals that have access to Teams only have the purview to see information at a grantee perspective, meaning you are an educator or an administrator and you're working with Jane Doe and you're putting information in the system for Jane Doe under Region 20. When you go to look at information and pull reports, you only see what you have done with Jane Doe, but you're not understanding that maybe that Jane Doe has already had services in that program year in Dallas or out in East Texas or somewhere else in the state. So all the new reports and teams are going to be participant-based, not grantee-based. Because as a state, we measure participants on their cumulative outcomes and holistic statewide service approach, not just what ELCOT's doing for them, not just what Dallas did for them. We're measuring it as a state. And so the future of teams is you're going to be able to see that. The POP report is our first stab at being able to give you that level of information, which is why I want to go through this exercise so you can kind of better understand how it pulls information. The other one is currently in teams employment, so you can't collect nor see employment data in teams, but it's a big measure, right? We've been talking about that for the last several minutes. So that's a big measure for us, but you can't really see all that employment data. The future of teams is going to be coming along in basically two priority levels. The first thing is you're going to be able to collect supplemental wages and put those into teams. So even though if a person doesn't report their SSN number, which is what we use right now to do everything through a data match, you'll be able to manually enter supplemental information into teams. The second one is going to be to actually connect our system with the UI wage data information. So we're going to be pulling information from all the employer data that we get across the state and interfacing that into teams so that you guys know where people are employed, what those wages look like. And the reason why that is important is because everything that under WIOA is really about getting someone the best job that we can get them to create sustainability, for them economically. So those things are really important. Profiles is another thing, current teams functions versus future teams functions. Right now, you get one profile per program year, right? That's what we get. In the future, and what it should be, is that when a person comes into the program, they get what we call a profile at initial program entry. And regardless of where that student goes in terms of providers across the state or services that they receive, we want to know what happened when they first came into the program through the point that they exited. And then if they are out for that 90 days and they come back, we would start a new profile. So profiles are really meant to be based off of a period of participation and a time that we have with a student comprehensively outside of program year kind of timelines, if that makes sense. So right now, obviously, reports and teams are not really aligned to WIOA performance. You guys can't go in there and really just easily get this information. You've got to pull multiple reports, cobble things together, and that's not what we want. So we're going to slowly be working on all these reports and teams.
Okay, there is a question before we move on. The question is, just to make sure, when the second participation begins for a student on the sample slide, they would have to do orientation and baseline testing again.
That's a really good point. So yes, because periods of participation work the way that they do, and what defines a period of participation is the fact that we have had no contact with that person for 90 days or more. What we require is that if they return, that we are going to have to, A, reestablish eligibility to make sure they're still eligible for our services, and basically that's retesting. So when you think about how things operate at a local level, if you have policies in place, for instance, long breaks over the summer is typically what we see, and that's just because there's no classes available for the student to attend, then you're basically creating that break. And so when they come back, you would have to retest them and do all of these things. Whereas if a person can just cross over program years and keep that period of participation open, then you wouldn't have to retest them July 1st or in July, because it's all going to be based off of, the fact that they have been in services. Good question, Liz. So I want to talk about the actual report that you guys have available to you right now. You can go in there right now and that you can pull it. So the POP report and some of the key functionality with the POP report, and I kind of already hit on this, is that it's a participant-level comprehensive view. That means that it's going to tell you who is considered a participant, which means they have 12 hours, 12 direct hours. It's going to tell you reportable individuals, which is anybody that has come into the program and they have at least one contact hour, they have a test and one contact hours, but they haven't gotten to that 12 hours yet. So you can kind of see how many people do you have in the wins and how many people are we really losing before they get to this 12-hour period. It's going to tell you who's left the program. Again, exiters are considered those who have went 90 days without a direct proxy or training hour. It's going to tell you these exclusionary reasons, which we talked about before. It means if you've told us that there's an exclusionary reason, you're going to be able to pull this on the report and see those individuals on the report that you've entered that information for. And IET quality is one, too, that I'm putting on the list because we do use the POP report to say if a person is in an integrated education and training, if we have a large bulk of training hours and very few contextualized academic hours, that may be something we would want to use this report to look at to make sure that the goal of the IET, which is really to improve the academic skills of that participant so that they can lead to the credential that they need, is really happening. It's also linear in design, so it's holistic, comprehensive count of hours and participation status, regardless of grantee. And what I mean by that in particular, regardless of grantee, I just wanted to be able to show you an example. So whenever I say that the POP report is going to give you holistic, comprehensive counts of hours and participant status, regardless of grantee, this is kind of what I mean. This is just one example. So in this example, I pull the POP report at my local level, and I can see on the POP report that this individual student has 84 total basic education hours. That means direct hours and proxy hours. But if I were to go in Teams and look up this exact same student in Teams for my grantee, I would say they only have 33.5. What's going on here? So we kind of get that question a lot. So what this would immediately tell me is that during this period of participation that started on 8/19/2019 to when their last date of service was, which is 11/6/2019, somebody else other than me is serving this participant. And that's information that we want to know, right? Because as a state, again, thinking back to when do we test people, right? When do we test someone that's on a tape? Well, 40 hours is sort of the threshold, right? But if we're looking at this from a participant level in Teams, I would say this participant isn't ready for a post-test. They only have 33.5 hours, when in reality, they have 84 hours total for the state, and they were ready to test, 40 hours ago. So those are sort of, interesting things that the POP report will tell you, but it's just something to kind of keep in mind in terms of how that report pulls information. It's going to give you the student status on a very holistic level and not just a grantee level. So the POP report, I want to go over a couple of things that the POP report can do. And as you're pulling it, and I hope if you're not using it right now, the whole goal of having this Teacher Tuesday is to say, hey, I can use this, and to go in there and pull it and start playing around with it and seeing what all it can tell you. But I wanted to go over just a couple of quick things. One is the column that you see on the POP report, and this is a good opportunity for you guys to take the POP example that you were sent in your email. So take it out, start to look at it, because we're going to start to work through it. So take that out, and you're going to see a column that says participant flag. And what that means and what it's telling you is that that person is in the denominator for your performance measures. That means that they have met that 12-hour threshold. That means they need an MSG for whatever program year you pulled this report. It means that if they exit, that they're going to fall into your employment outcomes measures. So it's a good way to kind of get just a quick check, a quick gut check on the participants that you have. You can use this in many different ways. The next one, I want you to look for the column that says reportable individual. So the reportable individual flag means that these are students who have less than 12 direct hours, and they're not in your denominator for measures. Now, that can be a good thing, a positive and negative there, right? It's really just informational. They're a reportable individual. It could be they came in, they went to an orientation, we tested them. They're obviously eligible because they have at least 1 hour, which means we put them in a class, but they didn't get to 12 hours. So we don't know the why there. We don't know if they came in, they were dissatisfied with services. We don't know if they came in and they had just multiple barriers that, resulted in the fact that they just couldn't continue to come to class, or if they are currently sitting in class right now and are the best student ever and they just haven't made it to 12 hours. It's just information, but it's information that you guys can really use. There's a column called Exiter Flag. What that tells you is that you're on the clock. So that Exiter, if that Exiter flag is yes, that means that the student has exited the program, which means we have not provided services in the last 90 days, and that you're on the clock in terms of what the outcomes are for those individuals, like employment. Participation start date is going to be the day that participation flag went from a no to a yes. So the participation start date is literally what day did they get to 12 direct hours and started counting in our performance measures. Last service date is going to be just exactly what it says. It's the last date that we provided any services in the terms of direct, proxy, or training hours for that individual. Number of days since the last service date is very important because this is going to give you your countdown to an Exiter status. So if you're looking at this POP report and you're saying, oh, number of days since last service date is 89 days, you got 1 day, and that person's going to go into an exit status. So you can use this for re-engagement focuses. You can use this for outreach focuses. As an administrator, you can use this to kind of say, you can break all of this down. Actually, that's a really good point. I want to take a minute to talk about it. The POP report is filterable by provider, by site, and by class. So you can take all of this information that I'm sharing with you and you can break it down in multiple ways to see if you want to just see what a specific instructor is doing or yourself as an instructor is doing. If you just want to see what your class is doing, then you're going to be able to do that with this report. The last column is exclusionary reasons. So if someone has entered an exclusionary reason in Teams, it's going to show up on this report. So if you do work with a lot of correction individuals and justice-involved individuals, you're going to want to check this report regularly to make sure that those exclusionary reasons are being entered and helping you out on those employment outcomes. So one of the other documents that you have in front of you is a report description. It's pretty long. I think it's about 15 pages or so. But if you walk away from here today and you just are like, this is really overwhelming, go back to the report description. It tells you every single column that exists on the extract of this report and what that column is representing. It's a little wordy, written in IT language, which isn't always the best, but I think it's pretty sound just, to help you guys out. So the summary report, there's two different types of ways that you can pull this report in Teams. One is called the summary and the other is called the extract. The summary is more high level. It's going to give you just the nuts and bolts. It's going to say who's a participant, have they exited already, or are they getting ready to exit, when was the last time they were sitting in class, and are they excluded. So it's just very high level. It's the crispy report. The extract is a little bit more information. So if you're just looking for, a really quick kind of, okay, who's going to be in the denominator for an MSG, you can use the summary report and that'll get you what you want. If you're really wanting to see that student in a more comprehensive view, I always say go to the extract. So we're going to spend the last few minutes here, and I want you to really be able to use this extract for some of the reasons that I think that it'll be beneficial for you in the field. So looking at your POP report example that you have in front of you, I'm going to go through a series of questions, and I want you guys to just kind of follow along with me. So the first question in looking at the extract is, what participant exited 7/8/2019? So if somebody comes to you and says, hey, when did Jane Doe leave? Like, when was the last time she was in class? So what participant in looking at this POP report example left 7/8/2019? And the second part of that question is, did they need an MSG for the PY 2019 program year? So those of you who said it was participant number 1, you would be correct. So if you're looking at participant number 1, I can see that their last service date was 7/8/2019. That they have an exeter flag that says yes. So that means they're an exeter and the last date of service was 7/8/2019. So does this person need an MSG for the current program year? Our current program year starts July 1st of 2019 and runs through June 30th of 2020. So even though this individual's last date of service was only 8 days into the program year, guess what? You still need a measurable skills gain for this person. They're still in the denominator. So that's just something that you have to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about periods of participation, is that student, once they get that participant flag of yes, it stays yes across program years until they exit. So let's do some more. Does student 18 need an MSG for 1920? So go down to student 18 on your POP report example and tell me if they need an MSG for this program year. What would be something, again, going back to what I said, what would be the indicator that they would need an MSG? So those of you that said, no, they don't need an MSG because they're not a participant, you're correct. So all the individuals who have a reportable individual flag of yes are not yet in the denominator for needing an MSG. Okay. Next question, how many individuals have training hours reported? So we're getting down to some more simple questions here, but it's just a way for you guys locally to look at the report and see all the information that it can give you. So if you said 5, that's correct. So I'm going to skip around a little bit because we have a few more questions that I want to get to. Actually, there's one thing I did want to bring up on for this report, and that was for those of you who are trying to figure out who needs a credential, just from a not the fact do they have one, but who needs one. It's looking at this. So if you're looking at this POP report, what students should you be checking for IET credentials? It's not a trick question, but you got to kind of, think through it a little bit. So we know by looking at this report that we have 5 individuals that have training hours. What we know about training hours is that only individuals that are in an IET should have training hours. So what we know is that we have 5 individuals that we are going to have to track for credentials, and every single time going back to these 5 individuals, if you scroll over and their exit flag, changes to a yes, then you're kind of on that hook for those exit-based measures, right? And you need that credential, and you have to put that in Teams. So let's look at student 1. Using your POP report extract, looking at student 1, are they excluded from exit-based measures? So looking at student 1, scroll across and kind of tell me, are they excluded from exit-based measures? And the answer is no. The reason why they're not excluded is because they have a participant flag of yes, right? And if you scroll all the way over to your POP, it's probably going to end up on the back page for you guys, just like it is on mine. There is a column that says exclusionary reason. In order for us to exclude them from an exit-based measure that they fell into the denominator for, that exclusionary reason column would need to say yes. For this particular student, it's a no. So right now, they're not excluded. Next question, how many new students did you add this program year? Now, these are some of the questions you can, or some of the information you can get out of the report that's not just a column, right? It's not just going to be super easy, but the information is in there. So how many new students did you add this program year? How would you find this information out by using the POP report? Think about that one. So in order to find out how many new students you added this program year, the column you're going to want to look at is your participation start date. So if you go to the participation start date column and you scroll down, and you basically would be wanting to filter this for any student who has a participation start date that is after July 1st, 2019. That's going to tell you how many new people that you had coming into the program versus students who are carry forward students from last program year. And that's important information to know, and just in terms of volume of students, of new students that you have coming in versus students that you have staying in the program across program years that, you know, may have been students prior and still have an open period of participation. Last question, how many students have a planned gap in service? And we didn't really talk about what planned gap is, but again, those of you that are familiar with our policies and sort of what that is and how that can help support you, this report will give you that information if you've entered it. It'll also tell you if, as an instructor, if you're like, hey, I reported that Jane was going to be out for the next, 100 days because she had a baby and she needs to be put in a planned gap. She's going to come back to services. You can pull this report and you can look at it and say, okay, somewhere the communication got broken down because I don't see a planned gap for Jane. So that's just one way. So that is kind of some of the things that this report can tell you. Now, I know we were kind of rushed through that, but one thing I wanted to say is the things that it doesn't tell you are the things that we're going to be covering in Part 2 next month after the new report comes out, and that is going to be your measurable skills gain. So what we know is that once they hit participant status, you're on the hook for an MSG. The next report we're going to talk about is going to say, and this is how this report is going to tell you whether or not you've met the measurement for all of those individuals. So we'll be doing that next time. Did I have any last-minute questions? I hope you guys really enjoyed having lunch with me today and going through some of this information. I'd like to continue to do this and support administrators just getting information out there and how to use reports and new features in Teams. So hopefully you've found it, very useful. Any questions for me as we close up here?
Mahalia, do you want to go back to those two questions that we had earlier? Okay, the first one was, would there be a need to collect information on supplemental wages at any point other than at exit?
That's actually a really good question, and the functionality, let me tell you about how we're going to build it. So we're going to build the functionality so that if you get access to that information, even while they're participating, that you will be able to go ahead and enter it into Teams. And my only thought process there would be if a student, you never know when a student's going to stop coming to class. A lot of times we just don't know. And it's a lot easier for you to go back and say, hey, I can see that this person reported supplemental wages, 3 months ago, and I'm just going to follow up with that employer if the student isn't responding to outreach after they exit so that you can get that information after they exit. So we're going to build it so that if you do collect it while they're participating, you can put it into the system.
All right.
But in terms of how we're using it for performance, that all happens after exit.
All right. The other question was, will the participant with latest assessment report ever accommodate CASAS testing, or will it be replaced by the MSG report?
It's likely going to be replaced from by the MSG report, and that's another reason why I wanted to do these type of webinars, because I would like y'all's feedback on some of that. So a lot of that information you're going to find on the MSG report, but I'm not going to disable any reports until I get some feedback from you guys. If we decide to keep it, then yeah, we would need to update it for CASAS and any other assessments that we're currently under. But I think you're going to get everything you need from the MSG report. So tune in next time and then you can tell me, because it's going to be coming out. Again, guys, the report will be live for you April 1st, and then we're going to have Part 2 of this on April 14th. So you'll have some opportunity to kind of play around with that MSG report before our next time together.